Every spring, across the lawns of the wealthiest nation on earth, people kneel in the grass and pull the same plant out by its roots. They spray it with chemicals, they dig trenches around it, they pay companies to eliminate it from their property on a recurring schedule because it keeps coming back. It always comes back. And they call this gardening. They call this maintenance. They call the plant a weed, which is a word that means, in practice, nothing more than this: a plant that grows where it was not invited and refuses to leave when asked. The dandelion has been feeding people for 10,000 years. It has more nutritional density than almost anything sold in a modern grocery store. It was once grown deliberately, carefully in kitchen gardens across Europe and colonial America. Physicians prescribed it, farmers planted it. Entire communities depended on it through the hunger months of early spring when nothing else had yet come up from the ground. And then, in the 20th century, the system decided it was a problem. Not because it had changed, because the system had. What the dandelion offered, abundance without cost, food without ownership, medicine without a prescription, had become, in the language of industrial agriculture, unmanageable. A plant that grows everywhere for free has no place in a market that sells things. This channel exists because some things should not be forgotten. Ancient Food Files is a keeper of buried knowledge, the agricultural traditions, indigenous food systems, and ecological wisdom that the modern world passed over in its rush toward efficiency and profit. If you are watching this for the first time, consider what it means to be part of an archive, not a follower count, an archive. Subscribe and help ensure that what is documented here is not lost again. Now, let us go back, further back than the lawn, further back than the herbicide, back to when the dandelion was not something to be destroyed, but something to be sought. The name comes from the French dent de lion, tooth of the lion. It refers to the serrated edges of the leaves, which cut the air like something feral and intentional. The plant's scientific name, Taraxacum officinale, carries its own weight. Officinale is the designation given in Linnaean taxonomy to plants of established medicinal use, the same suffix carried by sage, rosemary, and dozens of other plants that earned their place in the official pharmacopoeia of European medicine. The dandelion earned it. Its origins are traced to Central Asia and the mountainous regions of what is now Afghanistan, Iran, and the Caucasus. It spread westward along trade and migration routes so gradually, so completely, that by the time written records in Europe began to accumulate, the dandelion was already everywhere, already woven into the food cultures of people who could no longer remember a time before it. The Welsh called it dant ilew. The Irish knew it as caesarvan. In Norse traditions, it was connected to Hecate, goddess of the in-between spaces, thresholds, crossroads, the hours before dawn. The plant that grew in the cracks between things was placed, symbolically, in the care of the deity who governed those same spaces. This was not coincidence. These were observation systems. These were people watching a plant closely for generations and encoding what they saw in the only medium that survived the centuries: story, symbol, and name. In 1918, as the First World War drew toward its conclusion and civilian food systems across Europe had collapsed under 4 years of industrial slaughter, the British government printed pamphlets encouraging citizens to gather and eat dandelion greens. The U.S. Department of Agriculture issued similar guidance during the Second World War as part of the broader Victory Garden campaign. These documents still exist in national archives. They are not difficult to find. What is difficult to explain is why the same governments that once urged people to eat dandelions have since spent decades subsidizing the chemicals used to kill them. The answer, like most answers about the 20th century, begins with petroleum. After the Second World War, the chemical industry found itself with enormous production capacity built for wartime herbicides and nerve agents, and a peacetime economy that needed new applications for that capacity. The lawn care industry became one answer. The American lawn, a symbol of prosperity, of order, of a particular vision of suburban life, required maintenance. Maintenance required product. And the dandelion, which required nothing and produced itself without asking, was recast as the enemy of that order. The transformation was not accidental, it was marketed. Chemical companies and their competitors ran campaigns through the 1950s and 1960s that systematically associated the dandelion with failure, with the neglectful neighbor, the unkempt property, the households that had let things slip. Homeowner associations encoded it into their rules. Municipal ordinances in hundreds of towns listed the dandelion as a noxious weed, making its deliberate cultivation technically illegal on residential property. In several jurisdictions, those ordinances still stand. A plant that had fed armies and sustained peasants through famines was reclassified by the stroke of marketing language and municipal code as a nuisance. The process took roughly 20 years. The herbicide industry that benefited from that reclassification now generates billions of dollars annually. The dandelion generates nothing. It cannot be owned. Its seeds belong to the wind. The science did not agree with the reclassification. In 2011, a study published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine found dandelion root extract effective in inhibiting the growth of cancer cell lines in laboratory conditions, findings that have since been replicated and expanded in subsequent research. A 2016 study documented dandelion's hepatoprotective properties, its apparent role in supporting liver function, consistent with what traditional herbalists in Europe and China had been recording for centuries. Research on inulin, the prebiotic compound concentrated in dandelion roots, has expanded substantially since the early 2000s. Studies have connected regular inulin consumption to improved gut microbiome diversity, reduced inflammatory markers, and improved glycemic response. The dandelion root, which can be dried and roasted as a coffee substitute, which was used medicinally across 4 continents, turned out to contain exactly what traditional systems said it contained. The knowledge was always accurate. It was simply not produced in a form the modern world recognized as legitimate. In the working-class communities of southern Italy, the wild dandelion carries a complicated social memory. Gathering wild greens was the practice of people who had nothing else. It marked poverty. It marked the war years, the years of occupation, the years when the fields produced little and the roadsides produced what they always produced, regardless of what men decided above them. A generation raised on foraged greens raised children who wanted groceries, who wanted the plastic-wrapped lettuce from the supermarket that proved by its very existence that you were no longer the kind of family that had to gather food from ditches. The forgetting happened in a single generation. It was chosen, not maliciously, with love and the entirely human wish to give one's children something easier than what one had endured. The loss was a byproduct of survival. The soil that the dandelion has been improving for millennia is now in measurable decline. Roughly a third of the world's agricultural topsoil has been degraded within a single human lifetime. The monoculture farming systems that replaced traditional polycultures have depleted organic matter, collapsed microbial communities, and created a dependency on synthetic fertilizers that are themselves becoming difficult to sustain. The dandelion asks none of this. It does not ask for fertilizer. It does not ask for irrigation. It does not ask for stable trade routes or functional supply chains. It pushes through asphalt. It grows in the rubble of demolished buildings. It appeared, famously, in the ruins of Hiroshima within weeks of the bomb, one of the first living things to return to ground that humans had declared uninhabitable. It was already prepared for what is coming. It has always been prepared. The question is not whether the dandelion will survive the collapse of the systems that tried to eradicate it. That question has already been answered. The question is whether we will have the humility, when the time comes, to kneel in the grass again, not to pull it out, but to gather it. The knowledge was never lost. It is in the pharmacopoeias. It is in the wartime pamphlets in the National Archives. It is in the hands of those who still gather what grows freely. It is in the research papers. It is in the soil, where the taproot is already working, already breaking the compacted layer, already drawing up what the surface has forgotten was there. The dandelion does not need to be rediscovered. It never left. It has been flowering in the same cracks, setting the same seeds into the same wind, feeding the same bees at the same hour of the same spring morning for longer than any system that tried to suppress it has existed. It will be doing this after those systems are gone. Patience is not something it had to learn. Patience is what it is. If this archive matters to you, if the knowledge gathered here feels worth holding on to, subscribe to Ancient Food Files. Every name remembered is one less silence. The vault is open.